We are in a political system in which a lot of people are frustrated with the options that they have before them. And so part of what we need to do is be able to open up our political imaginations to be able to imagine a different kind of future together. And so that begins, I think, by studying the outliers or figuring out what are the organizations and the movements and the places where a different kind of future is being realized, and how can we learn from those places to understand how we make that experience the experience for everyone. Because in a democracy, we don't want just little pockets of people engaged. We want everyone to be invited into the same opportunities.
That is an excerpt from an interview with 2025 MacArthur Fellow Hahrie Han, a political scientist addressing critical questions about how and why people participate in civic and political life. Employing a range of ethnographic, sociological, experimental, and quantitative methods, she examines organizational structures and tactics that encourage individuals to interact across lines of difference and work together for change in the public sphere. In this episode, we go in depth with Hahrie to learn more about her work, and her exceptional creativity. Let's hear more from her interview.
I grew up as a daughter of Korean immigrants in Houston, Texas, and I grew up in a family that was not very political, so we didn't talk about politics at the dinner table. It was never something that I thought that I would do. But one of the things that I did learn from being the child of immigrants is that transformation is not only possible, but it's a way of life. That what we do is try to remake ourselves, to remake our families, to remake the world around us. When I went to college, I happened to get involved in student activism. Once I had the experience of working with my peers to try to throw our whole hearts into solving a problem together, I wanted to understand how to make that experience more possible for more people. And so that's a lot of what I've done, is dedicated myself to understanding the mechanics of collective action so that we can become more intentional about how we create those opportunities for other people. Democracy is ultimately about people from all different kinds of backgrounds and viewpoints forging a common life together. And so a healthy democracy is one in which you have lots of different kinds of people grounded in their own interests, connected to each other with their hands on the levers of change. And so we want people from all different kinds of viewpoints to feel like they can be authors of their own future. I think one of the mistakes that people make a lot when they think about participation is to think that all forms of participation are the same. And one of the things that we know from the research is that not all forms of collective action are the same. And there's a real difference between getting people to do a thing versus getting people to become the kind of people who do what needs to be done. And so I think a lot of times in public life, we're just focused on how do I get people to come out to vote, sign a petition, donate money, show up to a meeting. And there's lots of different strategies that we can use to get people to do something once. But it's really different to think about the question of how do we organize them to develop a compass that helps them navigate the uncertainty that is inherent in trying to solve a problem with people who are different from them. When we think about why it is that ordinary people do and do not participate in politics, we have to think not only about what it is that people want, but also what the opportunities are that are offered to them. One of the things that we know is that the work of democracy is actually really hard. It's not something that we as humans are born knowing how to do. How is it that I work with someone who disagrees with me? How is it that I articulate my own interests? How is it that I learn how to participate in my community? And so just like we all need gyms to exercise our physical bodies, we need gyms or places where we can go to develop the muscles that we need for democracy. It's about trying to figure out how do we make those kind of gyms available for as many people as possible. What are the invitations that we can offer people that pull them off the sidelines and then equip them to be able to articulate their interests in the public sphere? It turns out that those kind of quote unquote schools of democracy are the churches, the community organizations, the Rotary clubs, the book clubs, all the different kind of civic entities that pull people together around a variety of different interests and issues. I've done a lot of work with organizations that work with immigrant communities in Arizona, for example, trying to understand how it is that we pull young people together to be able to fight for the rights of communities like the Dreamers. I've worked with multi-faith organizations in Minnesota that are trying to think about how it is that we bring people from a lot of different kinds of faith backgrounds together into one conversation to realize kind of public goals together. My last big project was studying people fighting for racial justice within one of the largest evangelical megachurches in America. And that was a place where I think a lot of people would at first blush assume that you don't have a lot of people working on racial justice together. Yet when I went on the ground, what I realized was this was a church that built a really strong community that was grounded in a motto that they had, which is this idea that belonging comes before belief. When you draw people into communities of belonging with each other, when people forge that kind of trust, then a lot of different things become possible. And in this case, part of what they were able to do is draw together conversations across race to help both Black and white people of faith consider how it is that their faith and their commitments to a just society came together when it came to questions of race in America. And so that was a place where they could have conversations across some of the most intractable issues in America because they were grounded in that community of belonging. One of the real challenges in civic life is how do we bring people into the kind of intimate relationships that they need in order to be able to negotiate difference, but also do it at the scale that we need to make that kind of opportunity available to all people. And so one of the things that I learned from my work with churches and other kind of entities is that a lot of the most effective organizations are structured like a honeycomb. So if you imagine a beehive, it has lots of different little cellular structures that are connected to each other within a broader beehive. And what that does is that enables the structure to bend without breaking, because within each cell, people are connected to each other in intimate relationships where they can have real, authentic conversations about the things they care about and the places where they agree and disagree. But it doesn't just stay within that intimate conversation of 8 to 10 people or however many people, but instead it's connected to something larger so that they're able to connect that conversation to a broader program of change or public life. And so that honeycomb structure, I think, is foundational to allowing people to do work that is both small and big at the same time. Mapping the Modern Agora is a project that uses computational social science in order to map civic infrastructure in the United States. And one of the things that we find is that communities that tend to be wealthier and better educated are more likely to have more civic opportunity. And so the question is, how do we make sure that civic opportunity is distributed equally for all people? As a director of the P3 lab, I work with our team to try to understand how it is that we can make the participation of ordinary people possible, probable, and powerful. So people have to be able to participate, they have to want to participate, and it has to actually matter. And so a lot of the work that we do is partnering with constituency-based organizations in the United States and around the world to understand what are the strategies they can use to pull people off the sidelines into public life, but then also how do they scaffold people's engagement to translate that engagement into the outcomes that people care about. And so we've been really privileged to work with a wide variety of different kinds of organizations to essentially put data and learning around their work to help them become more strategic and more intentional about the work they do to engage people in public life. My hope is that my work helps ordinary people, but also all the organizations and movement leaders out there working together to realize a vision of a shared future. I think ultimately a healthy democracy is grounded in people working with each other to figure out how they solve problems to create the world that they want. And right now, too many people feel like there's a gap between the world as it is and the world as it could be. And so I would hope that any person who engages with my work comes away with some insight about how it is that they can begin to develop the compass and the skills that they need to be agents of the communities that they want to see.
Hahrie Han is the Stavros Niarchos Foundation Professor in the Department of Political Science at Johns Hopkins University, where she also previously served as the inaugural director of the SNF Agora Institute and the faculty director of the P3 Lab. The MacArthur Fellows program identifies and supports extraordinarily creative individuals with a track record of excellence who demonstrate the ability to impact society in significant and beneficial ways through their pioneering work. To learn more, visit us at macfound.org.